Good evening, and thank you all for coming here to get informed about the different candidates and our positions on different issues. My name, as Dan mentioned, is William Ralph, and I'm running for selectman as well. Interesting thing about my name, because my last name is also a first name, a lot of times when people first meet me, they start calling me Ralph. And that goes on for about 2 weeks, and then usually they realize their mistake and they come up to me and they go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just realized your last name is Ralph, not your first name. I'm so sorry, Bob." And then they call me Bob for quite a while before I have to finally correct them. But anyways, the point of that, the takeaway here is, remember my name is William Ralph when you go to vote on the 13th. And secondly, if a guy named Bob gets a write-in, it's mine. But my platform is based on primarily fiscal responsibility. I think our taxes are too high. I think when you compare our town to similar towns, you will find as well that our taxes are higher than they need to be. Accountability, transparency. If you've seen my signs, you know that that's pretty much what I stand for, and thank you. I agree, and so I want to disclose, I've run my campaign pretty much on lowering taxes. If I do that, I will benefit financially from that, as will all of my family members as well. Everybody that owns property in town will benefit from that. Other than that, I don't know of any conflict that I have to deal with, so. Thank you. I also think that the financial aspect of our future is something that's a priority for us right now. When you look at, for instance, we heard from the Board of Health earlier, and we get a couple of $1 million a year into the Robert Reyes Fund, which is the Major Capital Facilities Stabilization Fund. And if we don't have adequate funding for positions in organizations like the Board of Health, we do risk losing that money if people decide that Dedham's not a safe place to come and eat. So fortunately that hasn't happened, but it's something that we want to be aware of. When I was the Assistant Director of Finance, we unfortunately lost the Treasurer-Collector. I took over as the Acting Tax Collector for a while, and I had senior citizens in my office literally crying because they had to put their tax bills on their credit cards, and some of them had been doing it for years at 26% interest with no hope of ever paying that off. So one of the things that I think we need to do is address that and make people aware of some of the options that they have in that category. Yeah, and just to add, if you look at the org chart of the town, obviously the residents are at the top, and then you have town meeting, and then you have the Board of Selectmen. So the Board of Selectmen isn't as important as you think. We're just a lot more visible most of the time than the town meeting members. They're the ones that make all the big decisions, and they rely on information from us. When the rail trail issue became so divisive, I think that part of the reason for that was lack of information, or lack of transparent information that people had about it. I won't go into, I did a lot of work on looking at the title and looking at the finances and found that title wasn't clear. Rail trail was going to cost us a lot more. But at the end of the day, if people knew that, I really think that they probably would have come together and tried to find a different solution to outdoor recreation and meeting the needs that the rail trail supporters were looking to fill. And I would agree with that there's a good need for outdoor recreation, and I'd be all for that, but just for me with the rail trail, and thank you. Yes, I am concerned about climate change, and as you know, there's a lot of boards and committees in this town that deal with it. We had a question about it earlier from the Parks and Rec Department. I think that one of the biggest things that we can do as the Board of Selectmen is to work with those other boards in order to arrive at solutions that we can implement locally. This problem isn't going to be solved by the Dedham Board of Selectmen, but it is going to be solved by collectively little boards of selectmen and different boards and committees throughout the country and throughout the world. And so we have to do our part to address what we can, maybe even be a leader in that area and be a model for other communities to follow suit, because it's an important issue. And again, there's not something that we can do as the Board of Selectmen to eradicate the problem. But there are little steps that we can take, and we can play a leadership role and a model role for the rest of the state and the rest of the country.
First question, starting with you, please, Carmen. What goals would you initiate to create greater equity for the growing number of Dedham residents of color? What actions would you take to achieve these goals?
I grew up in Dedham, and you know, as diverse as we like to think Dedham is now, it wasn't very diverse back then. And I had very limited interaction with people of color. It wasn't until when I was in law enforcement, I met other officers, I met other people, and by the time I was 35, one of my best friends was an African-American man from Dedham here. And we got into a lot of discussions about the differences between our viewpoints on things. And one thing that became apparent to me was that I didn't often understand his perspective on things. When he started to explain to me, for example, when a police car drives behind him, when I saw that, that didn't mean anything to me. But when he saw it, he saw a policeman waiting for him to make a mistake so he could pull him over for some reason. So I think it starts with understanding their perspective and understanding the point of view that they come from and helping to make them feel more comfortable with the environment and with the you know, with our culture.
Demetra, would you as a member of the Board of Selectmen support the Finance Committee being elected officials instead of appointed?
For those of you that don't know, currently they're appointed by the town moderator, and you just never know who you're going to get for a moderator. That's part of the problem. But I would be open to the idea. There's always a sort of tug of war in ideas between whether it's better to be elected or whether it's better to be appointed. I guess the assumption would be if you get elected, you're only getting into that game because it's of interest to you. It's something that you do professionally, preferably. If you get appointed, obviously you can seek out people that you know are professionals in the area of finance. So I guess I'm not prepared to give a commitment either way on that. I would, if that's something that we're going to consider, I would commit to researching it a bit and seeing what, you know, how, the experiences other communities have. I've lived in communities where they're elected. I've lived in communities where they're appointed, and I've lived in communities where they're a combination of both. Some of them are appointed and some of them are elected. So there's a lot of options. And thank you.
Okay. Sarah, why are small business owners paying the same tax rate as corporate businesses in Dedham? Surrounding towns offer tax breaks for small business.
I would like to say that this is a very important issue to me because Dedham does have a split tax rate. If you have a residential property, you're paying somewhere around $15 as a tax rate, and if you have a commercial property, you're paying closer to $30. And that means that a lot of our taxes come from a commercial base. And we could get to the point where we tax them out of the town. It's not that difficult for a lot of small business owners to move to a place right near where we are. And for instance, we have that development that is trying to thrive over in Westwood, but you know, if they open up some incentives for businesses to move there, we could lose a significant portion of our commercial base. Same thing with the sewer rate. You know, they pay a higher commercial rate. They pay a commercial rate regardless of their size, and you know, typically that's used for the bigger consumers of water because it obviously takes more to process more water. But I think it's an important issue.
How do you feel about plastic reduction in Dedham? How do you feel about plastic reduction in Dedham businesses? I think they're asking for ways to reduce plastic in Dedham businesses.
I told you a story about my last name, right?
Yeah.
Plastic reduction in Dedham. So the issue, as I'm kind of interpreting that, is do I think that that is something like what Boston's doing? Should we get involved in a program like that where we eliminate, say, plastic bags at stores, or take other steps to eliminate plastic in general? You know, there's a lot of different concerns with plastic. Obviously, it's an environmental factor is one. Just from a biological factor, some of the plastics we're finding are not good for people to be using. And on the other side, as an environmental factor, they pollute and they take millions of years to break down and decay. So I think I lost track of what my question was. What would I do?
They say, how do you feel about it? I think it is.
I feel good.
There you go. Carmen, several residents have encountered responses from elected officials, either at public meetings or even on social media, that have been described as bullying, rude, dismissive. What are the standards and expectations for behavior of elected officials? How would you address bad behavior?
So, people get involved in politics and in other areas where people consider them to be authoritative for a couple of different reasons. One is because you really want to do something positive, you want to help the community, you want to help out people. And the other is you kind of need a little ego boost. And I think when you have bad behavior for that, you're not in the board or the committee or the position for the right reason. So the first thing is we have a process for making sure that that doesn't happen, and that's called going to the polls. But lacking that, I know that the town had a policy, a social media policy, and I thought it was distributed to all the boards and committees, but it may not have been, that they're required to follow, and that's not just for these reasons, but for liability reasons. And I don't think that there's any place for anybody to be bullying or rude to a member of the community, and I don't think it's something that we should tolerate.
Demetra, if you were elected as town official, how would you improve town services and departments to more equitably include and serve Dedham residents of different cultures?
I know a few years ago we were presented with a statistic from the school committee that told us that at the Avery school there was something like 17 non-English speaking, 17 different languages at the Avery school whose home life involved no English because the parents didn't speak English. So I think part of the issue has to be addressed with some sort of way to communicate with those people. Obviously, when we did the technology study, they made a recommendation that we actually hire a full-time, for lack of a better term, customer service person to help people that come to town hall figure things out. That might be in the form of having liaisons that speak different languages, and I'm positive we'd get even volunteers to help disseminate information to non-English speaking families so that they can at least be aware of the important things that are going on and some of the decisions that they might want to be involved with. Because, thank you.
The writer frequents Legacy Place because he or she hates going to Dedham Square because of the parking. Where could we get increased parking to serve Dedham Square?
I'm aware of the results of that study, but when I first heard the results, I thought that I don't have an easy time finding parking in Dedham Square sometimes. And I know they've included some of the parking down by Gonzalez Field and some of the places that are a little bit further away to walk. So I guess maybe we do have enough parking, but is it practical for some people? I don't know, especially when you consider that in the evenings there's a lot of restaurant traffic, and those people are there for a while. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to ultimately end up reinventing, not just in Dedham, but everywhere. We're going to be reinventing the downtown area. You know, when we think about trying to keep our businesses thriving and trying to compete with some of the Amazons and things, we have to reinvent the downtown area. And that's going to involve green space, it's going to involve for lack of a better term, clever parking to accommodate all of the visitors and make it a destination type of place.
Bill, you drew this question. How do you influence without having formal authority, especially within the confines of a public meeting setting?
So the question was, how do you influence without having formal authority, especially in the confines of a public setting? Get that right. So, I think, first of all, you know, I was in law enforcement. One of the first things that you learn is that authority is granted to you by the people who consider you to be authoritative. So the first thing that you need to do is to earn the respect and the authority of the people that you're trying to influence. When people trust you, you will have influence over them. When they believe you, they will trust you, and they will consider you to be an authority on whatever the subject matter is. When you are in the confines of a public setting, it's no different. You know, when people consider you to be somebody that they trust and believe, and authoritative in your knowledge of the subject matter, you will have authority. That's something that's granted to you by the people over whom you have authority. It's not something that you're given by some outside organization or force, but thank you.
Well, that was a very difficult question, but I think all of our candidates give very thoughtful answers to a difficult question. So, this is our last question of the night. There's been a lot of funding directed to Dedham Square over the past decade. What improvements in other parts of Dedham would you like to see excluding the square?
I think there's a lot of areas of town where we could encourage investments, and we could invest some of our own money in the Manor, Oakdale Square, East Dedham. And I'm not familiar with that curve, but hearing about things like that, we could certainly do a little bit better in that area. The sidewalks are something that are also extremely important to me because they're a safety issue for a lot of people. When we took, that's why I had an issue with $700,000 coming out of the roads money and going into the Robin Reyes Fund to subsidize the Major Capital Facility Stabilization Fund. I don't know if maybe some of you saw the article I wrote, but I thought that was a bad precedent because it calls not just for the $700,000, but for millions of dollars over the next few years to go into that fund. Millions of dollars that could be used in other areas of town, like the ones I already mentioned. So I think that there are many areas that we can invest in and encourage investment in, and I would definitely be on board for seeing some of that take place.
Let's have a round of applause for our candidates for the Board of Selectmen. And thank you to all of you for coming here on a work night and spending 2.5 hours learning about your town. Lynn Canavan from the Dedham Junior Women's Club is going to... Thank
you. And I wanted to thank Dan Driscoll for moderating, and thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. So thank you.